Today at managementdenker.de, our website, we have a wonderful guest, Professor Charles Hendy from the UK, and you use a lot of metaphors when you talk about management. You use a completely different language. Why?
Well, I think they're usually visual metaphors. You know, I talk about a shamrock and a donut and a portfolio and these sorts of things, because I think people remember images much more than they remember words, actually. And I'm trying to get images into people's minds. And so I think metaphors that give images are the best use of words. Actually now, in fact, wherever I talk, I don't actually use any words at all. I just put images up on the screen. And I think people are fascinated by that. It makes a difference to PowerPoint.
You talk and write a lot of new forms of organizations. Which organization do you see in the next decades?
Well, it's probably a combination of what I call an Athenian organization or a team culture. And I think that with a little bit of Apollo bureaucracy, or that's the way I call them after Greek gods, because I basically believe that team cultures are the best way of actually solving problems, interdisciplinary teams. And most of the organizations that I see working at the moment are changing so fast, or their customers are changing so fast, that they're endlessly having new problems in the marketplace, in the production lines and so on. And therefore the best way is to establish teams. So I'm saying really now, the new organization ought to be a whole bundle of projects, really. And when a project is ended, you kill it. And people move to other teams and other projects. So it's an organization that really looks a bit like some kind of beehive, you know? Lots of people buzzing around, but actually creating things on their own initiative.
We have at our website visitors from profit, for-profit and non-profit organizations. Will there be a difference in the organizational structure?
Well, yes, I think in the structure probably not, but in the culture, yes. I mean, it does seem to me that both have a lot to learn from each other. The business organizations have to learn from the not-for-profit organizations that the thing that motivates people is a culture of service. In the not-for-profit, they are there because they want to do good for somebody. And that's exactly what businesses sometimes lack. On the other hand, not-for-profits can be a bit slack about efficiency. And I think they need to learn from businesses that sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind. You know, the people who are not performing sufficiently well, once you've tried to get them better and they don't succeed, you have to move them somewhere else, or even out of the organization, for the sake of the whole organization and for the rest of the people. So they can learn from each other, and they do need to talk to each other. And they don't talk to each other enough, in my view.
In your autobiography, you write about your important partnership with your wife Elizabeth. And is a partnership, a personal background, underestimated in management?
Oh, I think so, and I think we're going to see much more of it. I think more and more people are going to become more semi-detached from the organization. They'll be working part-time or working on projects, slightly removed from the organization day-to-day activities. And those sorts of people will often be partnerships or what I call flea organizations, tiny organizations. And yes, they'll be husband and wife, or they'll be just friends and so on. And I think they're very valuable because they learn to trust each other. And they can work on empathy, really, rather than having to endlessly sort of write little memos to each other or send emails to each other. So I think we shall see more of it, and I think it's very valuable.
You have been very critical of management in business. In January you had an interview and proposed to get banks smaller. Do we need new rules for capitalism?
Well, I think we do. I think that there's a great danger that we overestimate the importance of growth and size, actually. I think on the whole, the economies of scale that you get from growing big are outweighed by the diseconomies of actually having to work in a huge organization where you in a sense disappear as an individual. And I believe you can get the economies of scale by entering into alliances with other organizations without necessarily having to merge them or to buy them up and so on. It's too easy, for managers to grow by buying another organization. And often they buy their competitors. And if they're allowed to do that, they are still reducing the efficiency of the marketplace. And I don't think they gain an awful lot about it. All the evidence we have of mergers and acquisitions is that 3/4 of them don't add any value. And so I'm in favor of keeping things small. And if necessary, I think in the financial world, by legal means, because it's very difficult to restrain these managers who find themselves in a very funny market in the financial world, where essentially you're not competing with anybody. You're all in the same sort of rat race together, it seems to me. You're all in the sort of financial marathon where everybody wins. And that's not the real law of the marketplace. In the law of the marketplace, a lot of people go to the wall. But no. So I really do think we've got to take different kinds of action to keep things reasonably sized. And the idea that you can be too big to fail seems to me a dangerous philosophy.
Are you working on a new book? We are curious about your new projects.
Well, what I'm doing is I'm working with my wife, who is a very distinguished portrait photographer. And the kinds of projects we're working on with her creative talent is basically, I think, helping people to understand who they are, identity in other words. And I think it's terribly terribly important aspect of self-responsibility. Nobody's going to be able to trust you unless they know who you are, and that starts with you knowing who you are. And we have found that using images, often which you describe, you bring yourself. For instance, we ask often people to compose a personal still life, where they bring 5 objects and a flower to a table, which my wife then photographs and shows them, and they can alter it then if they want to, before we make a final sort of print of it. And the idea is that these objects represent what's important to them in their life in some way or other. And people find it much easier to talk about objects than if I ask them straight off, what are your priorities in life? Because the objects conceal stories, and the stories conceal values. And so we're working on that, and I think that we may one day put that into some kind of book. But at the moment we're just doing the work, actually.